The strangest thing about waking up is how much it feels like dying. Not the physical kind, the quiet one, the inner death of who you thought you were. They tell you awareness brings peace, that enlightenment is a soft golden light at the end of confusion. But they rarely tell you what happens in the moments before the dawn breaks, the shaking, the grief, the sense that everything you once trusted begins to dissolve. You open your eyes, and suddenly, the furniture of your mind is rearranged. The certainties, the tidy shelves labeled good, bad, me, them, collapse like cardboard in the rain. Awareness does that. It doesn't hand you comfort. It takes your comfort apart and asks, can you love what remains? Have you ever stood in a silent room after a storm, when the power is out and the air feels charged but empty? That's what the first real moment of awareness feels like. You can hear your own breathing. You can hear the ticking of a clock that you never noticed before. And in that hum of stillness, something whispers, now what? Someone knocks on your door. You hesitate. You don't want to answer, not because you're afraid of them, but because you're suddenly aware of the act of answering itself. You sense the weight of the expectation, the subtle performance that begins the moment you say hello. That is the beginning of awakening, the sudden realization that every gesture you make is a ripple across consciousness. The pain of enlightenment isn't that the world changes, it's that you finally see it clearly. You see the masks people wear, the small lies they tell to stay stitched together. You see your own lies too, the way you pretend to be fine, the way you rehearse smiles, the way you chase meaning so you don't have to feel the emptiness. Awareness strips that away like skin that has grown too tight, and underneath, it hurts because you're raw, unprotected, without illusion. Alan Watts once said, "You don't look at the light, you become the light." But no one mentions the glare. When you first become aware, the light burns. It shows every crack, every forgotten corner you kept in shadow. You start noticing how your laughter sometimes hides exhaustion, how your compassion occasionally masks a need to be loved. And yet, this burning is grace in disguise, because what it exposes, it also begins to heal. If this reflection touches something inside you, if a part of you feels seen in these words, stay a little longer. There are more conversations like this waiting after this one. Sometimes, the smallest recognition is already the beginning of peace. Awareness asks for honesty, but honesty is rarely gentle. Imagine looking into a mirror that doesn't just show your face, it shows your motives. You smile at someone, and suddenly you know why. You say, "I forgive you," and you feel the small shadow inside that still hopes for their regret. Awareness doesn't judge, it reveals. But what it reveals can break the old shell of the self wide open. There was a man I once met in a quiet tea house by the river. He had that look, the one you only see in people who've looked too closely at truth. I asked him what he'd learned from all his meditations. He smiled without moving his lips and said, "Everything I wanted to be was just noise." Oh, then he lifted his cup and added, "But I still enjoy the taste of tea." That's awareness, seeing the illusion, yet choosing to sip life anyway. Still, many people imagine enlightenment as a constant state of bliss. They picture monks floating above the ground, immune to pain, serene in every breath. But awareness doesn't numb you, it makes you feel more. It sharpens the senses until the smallest things pierce your heart. The cry of a child in a marketplace, the silence between two lovers, the hum of the fridge at midnight, all become unbearable and beautiful at once. You start to understand that life was never meant to be escaped. It was meant to be felt. Some nights, you'll lie awake and wonder if it was worth it, this seeing, this constant consciousness. Because ignorance had a sweetness, didn't it? The comfort of blaming someone else, the relief of certainty, the simple faith that tomorrow will look like today. Awareness takes those toys away, and in their place, it hands you a mirror that never breaks. At first, You hate it. Then, slowly, you begin to see the divine in your own reflection. Aphorism. The light that frees you also exposes you. There's a moment in every seeker's path when the silence becomes too loud. You sit to meditate, and the thoughts don't stop, they multiply. You try to breathe, but the act of breathing feels mechanical. You realize you're watching yourself breathing, and even that feels like a trick. So you open your eyes, and for a second, the entire world seems like a film projected on water, real and unreal at once. You've stepped outside the dream, but you don't yet know how to live outside it. That's the ache of awakening. The soul's homesickness for an innocence it can't return to. Osho called it the birth pain of consciousness. He said, when a child is born, both mother and child cry not from sorrow, but from the intensity of entering a new dimension. Enlightenment is like that. You are both mother and child, birthing and being born. The contractions come as confusion, grief, anger, disillusionment, and each one pushes you closer to clarity. But clarity isn't comfortable. It demands the death of every story you told yourself to survive. Someone once asked me, why does truth hurt? And I said, because lies were shaped to fit our wounds. Truth doesn't aim to wound you, it just no longer fits the shape of your cage. When awareness grows, it starts pressing against the bars, bending them, cracking them. You hear the metal creak and think it's breaking you, but it's only breaking what was never real. Have you ever noticed how silence speaks louder than advice? A friend sits beside you, saying nothing, and somehow you understand everything. That's awareness, too, the communication that happens beneath words. You start to realize how much noise fills our lives, how often we speak to avoid the stillness that might reveal us. And so, the more aware you become, the less you need to talk. Not because you have nothing to say, but because everything feels already said in the quiet. Sometimes you'll feel lonely on this path. The world around you keeps chasing glitter, success, approval, certainty, while you sit watching dust float in a beam of afternoon light and call it sacred. You'll question if you've lost your mind or found it. But awareness isn't madness, it's clarity in a culture addicted to distraction. You begin to see how people cling to roles because identity feels safer than mystery. And the more awake you are, the harder it becomes to play pretend. That's why enlightenment hurts. It isolates you from the dreamers until your compassion grows large enough to hold them again. Aphorism. Awareness separates before it unites. And when it finally unites, it doesn't announce itself. It arrives like evening quiet, slow, inevitable. You look around one day and realize you no longer need to understand everything. The questions remain, but their sharp edges soften. The world hasn't changed, but you have. You've stopped demanding that it makes sense. You've started allowing it to be. Maybe that's the first real taste of freedom. Freedom, at first, feels like loss. You spend so long trying to become someone successful, someone kind, someone spiritual, that when awareness takes that identity away, it feels like being stripped naked in public. You stand there, trembling, trying to gather the old garments of your self-image, but they no longer fit. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispers, "Don't cover up. The wind is your teacher now." Alan Watts often said that awakening isn't about improving yourself, it's about seeing there's no self to improve. That sentence sounds beautiful until it starts happening to you. When the idea of me begins to dissolve, there's a kind of vertigo. Who's breathing? Who's deciding? Who's feeling sad? And yet, something keeps moving, eating, laughing. Life continues without the narrator. That's the unsettling part. Realizing you never had control, and somehow, everything's still fine. You walk down the street, and suddenly, faces look different. You can sense the stories behind them, the quiet despair, the longing to be seen, the fear of vanishing. Awareness gives you new eyes, but they come without filters. You start noticing the trembling hands of a cashier, the tired smile of a bus driver, the way a child looks up at their parent with unguarded trust. It's all unbearably human. You want to cry, but you don't know why, because the world has never been this beautiful or this fragile. One night, you might find yourself standing at your window, staring at the city lights below. Each light a story, a person, a consciousness moving through their own maze. And you realize how little separates you from them. The distance between me and you begins to blur, and for a heartbeat, you feel it, the oneness mystics always talk about. Then your mind returns, frightened by the vastness, and the walls come back up. That's okay. Awareness is not a straight line. It's a tide. It comes, it goes, and each wave leaves you a little more open than before. Aphorism. You can't hold the ocean and call it peace. There's a certain tenderness in waking up. You start forgiving people you never thought you could, not because they deserve it, but because you understand that hurt people don't know they're asleep. You see the pattern now, how every argument, every cruelty, every act of pride is just a defense against fear. Fear of being nothing, fear of dissolving, fear of the mirror that awareness holds up. Someone once asked Krishnamurti, "What's your secret? You always seem so peaceful." He smiled and said, "I don't mind what happens." To most people, that sounds passive, but it's not. It's the most radical statement of freedom possible. It means you've stopped fighting with life. You've stopped trying to bend reality to your will, and instead, you've become curious about what it's trying to show you. That's awareness, a willingness to be taught by everything, even pain. There's a woman sitting on a park bench, holding an old photograph. Her eyes are wet, her lips trembling slightly as she whispers a name no one else can hear. She thinks she's remembering someone lost. But what she's really feeling is the echo of herself, the version of her that once believed love meant possession. Awareness doesn't take away grief. It purifies it. It turns loss into understanding. You start to see that every goodbye is a kind of initiation into deeper love. Still, the mind resists. It wants order. It wants a final answer. A permanent state of enlightenment it can display like a trophy. But awareness keeps slipping through its fingers. It's not a state, it's a sensitivity. A living presence that refuses to be owned. The more you chase it, the more it hides. Until one day, you stop running, and it quietly sits beside you. Have you noticed how the more awake you become, the less certain you are? You used to have strong opinions about politics, morality, even spirituality. Now, everything feels softer, more complex. You can see all sides, and it makes arguing feel pointless. That humility is the sign of real growth. Because awareness doesn't make you right, it makes you real. And being real is far rarer than being right. Aphorism. Certainty is the coffin of curiosity. There's another danger in awareness, subtle but deep. Once you've glimpsed the truth, it's tempting to look down on those who haven't. You start calling yourself conscious and others asleep. You talk about vibrations and energy as if you've left the ordinary world behind. But that's the ego wearing the mask of enlightenment. It sneaks back in through the very door you thought you'd locked. You start preaching instead of listening, correcting instead of connecting. The real test of awareness is humility, the ability to see that no one is below you and no one is above. We're all waves on the same sea, pretending to be separate. Sometimes, awareness feels like standing between two worlds. In one, people hurry, argue, scroll endlessly through their screens. In the other, silence hums like a heartbeat beneath everything. You exist in both. You pay bills, answer emails, comfort friends, and yet, somewhere in the back of your mind, you know none of it is permanent. It's like watching a dream while being awake inside it. You can't unsee what you've seen, but you can learn to live gently within it. There's an old monk who once said, "Before enlightenment, I chopped wood and carried water. After enlightenment, I chopped wood and carried water." People often quote it, but few feel its weight. It means awareness doesn't make you special. It just makes you present. You still wash dishes, still feel loneliness, still forget your keys. But now, each act carries a strange holiness. The soap bubbles on your hands, the sound of running water, the sunlight on the floor, everything becomes an expression of life noticing itself. Someone calls your name, and you turn your head. In that turning, there's awareness. In that moment of recognition, existence recognizes itself. It's so simple, so ordinary, that the mind keeps missing it while searching for miracles. But awakening was never about fireworks. It's about finally seeing the divine in the everyday. Aphorism. Miracles hide in plain sight, waiting for quiet eyes. Sometimes, though, awareness brings sorrow. You start feeling everything, the collective sadness of the world, the suffering that hums beneath the surface of laughter. It can be overwhelming. You walk through a crowd and feel hearts breaking behind smiling faces. You turn off the news, but the pain still seeps through the walls of your empathy. That's when you learn the art of compassionate boundaries. You realize you can care deeply without carrying everything. You can open your heart without drowning in the ocean of the world. And that too is awareness. To know when to breathe, when to rest, when to say, "Not now, my friend. My cup is empty today." The danger of awareness is not that it hurts, it's that it reveals how much you were already hurting before. Only now, you can't look away, but in seeing it, you begin to heal. Pain becomes information. Loneliness becomes connection in disguise. Fear becomes a doorway, and you start to sense that everything, every mistake, every heartbreak was part of consciousness learning to see itself more clearly. You watch the sunset and realize it's not ending, it's transforming. The light doesn't disappear. It changes form. And maybe that's all awareness ever does. It changes the way you see endings. They stop feeling final. They start feeling sacred. And so, awareness isn't a destination. It's a quiet unfolding, a remembering that you were never truly asleep, only dreaming. Enlightenment doesn't lift you above life. It drops you deeper into it. You still feel the ache, the laughter, the uncertainty. But now, they move through you like wind through open hands. You don't cling anymore. You let everything arrive, stay for a moment, and pass. Because that's what awareness really is. Permission. Permission for existence to flow through you without resistance. Maybe enlightenment hurts because it softens everything you built to protect yourself. Your beliefs, your walls, your control, they start to melt. And in their place, love appears. Not the sentimental kind, but the raw, formless kind. The kind that can sit beside pain and still whisper, "This, too, belongs." Someone once said, "Awareness doesn't heal by removing the wound. It heals by revealing the wholeness around it." That's the paradox. You don't become perfect. You become real. You don't escape suffering. You understand it. You don't find heaven. You notice it was always here, hidden behind the noise of wanting. If these words have stirred something quiet inside you, if they've reminded you of something you already knew but had forgotten, then stay close. There are more reflections waiting, more doors to open, more moments like this to breathe together. You don't have to rush. Just take what resonates and let it settle. Awareness will do the rest. Because maybe, after all, you were never meant to find the answer, only to live the question.